structure. The course name is Introduction to Program Evaluation, Design and Implementation. What I want to emphasize is what I use ChatGPT for is qualitative examples for each student, customized to their assignment and their organization. I did not use it for quantitative grading. I did that myself. And I also write my own comments. I might need help with the smart screen. Okay, so this is the, now it's going too fast. So again, this is the kind of course structure, and what I use ChatGPT for is to provide examples in the first few assignments, because that's where I can have the most impact in terms of corrective action. Okay, swipe and wait. And just somebody was asking what program evaluation is. So those of you in the education field know that for every program you design, every educational program you design, you have to evaluate it, you have to monitor it, you have to evaluate it, and upfront you have to design it to make sure you're getting the results that you want. In this course, I will again swipe and wait a bit. The program evaluation elements include like a stakeholder analysis, and the details are not important, but what's kind of I wanted to say is this assignment includes like a stakeholder list, a stakeholder table, and then paragraphs for each row of that table, right? And yeah, again, I'm going to skip through the details. And what I try and do is focus on kind of current events, right? So some of you know in the Peel region, there's a big issue on auto theft. What many of you may not know is that a lot of the individuals involved in auto theft are actually students, some of them being international students. I have a lot of international students in my university, so I say, hey, this is something that some of you are actually involved in, right? And there was a person in the class actually said, yeah, I know those guys, right? What I do is kind of try, okay, develop a program to address this issue, right? It's part of its education, part of its sort of prevention, job opportunities, things like that. So this might be like a list of stakeholders for a program preventing the issue of auto theft in Canada, focusing again on an audience of international students. Yeah, that's okay. And so again, it's not just the assignment includes not just a list of stakeholders, but a stakeholder table going through kind of different kind of interests, objectives, the existing gap, and so on. And what I want to emphasize is that all this content that you're seeing, I didn't write it, right? It was actually generated by ChatGPT. And this is an iterative process. This is what I tell my students, like, you're going to forget things, you're going to miss something. And what I'm going to provide is an example showing you additional stakeholders, additional analysis that's better than what you did in your first round. So, in terms of, so this is what I provide to the student in terms of feedback. And again, what I want to emphasize here is that each student's working for a different organization, so no two students will ever have the same answer, right? I give them a list of organizations, say, you work in this organization, or they pick the organizations they want to work on. So each of their answers is going to be different. Therefore, each of my examples that I provide in terms of feedback is going to be separate and different for each student. No student will have the same answer, no student will have the same example provided back to them in terms of a better example. And again, this list generated by ChatGPT, again, the details of the table are not important. What's important, ChatGPT create this table. I said create a table with these stakeholders and these aspects, right? it flushes them out. And that intersections are pretty accurate when I look at them. The next assignment, if we can get to it, and sorry for the delays on the touch screen.
Touch the scroll bar.
Maybe we can use the scroll bar. Yeah. So here's the issue one. When ChatGPT creates a list of stakeholders, this is a program at a Sikh heritage center, right? A religious organization, and the program name was Feeding the Community. It included law enforcement officials. Why? For a program that is feeding the community, why does ChatGPT include law enforcement officials? Because the word Sikh, the Sikh community, there's a stereotype, incorrect stereotype, that this is a violent community, that you need law enforcement for every event, that where the Sikh community, that for a food program, you don't need law enforcement there. So this is a bias within ChatGPT that it includes as a stakeholder, right? So I use that as a kind of learning, a learning sort of example, right? Saying, look, here's another example. So this is a religious organization. Langar service is again a free food service. So anybody who's not Sikh may not know this. You don't have to be Sikh. You don't have to be South Asian, black, white. If you're hungry, the principle is that organization will feed you. Every Sikh temple has a free food service. You can go, no questions asked. You can get fed. Again, stakeholders created by ChatGPT. Sikh martial arts practitioners. Again, that stereotype of violence, right? We need Sikh martial arts practitioners to be there at a free food service. No, you don't, right? That's a bias within ChatGPT. So again, back to that stereotype. How does that stereotype get created? What gets to the data set? Training ChatGPT responses, right? These stereotypes of violence. Oh, these people are the people that steal cars, right? In violent ways. So that becomes an opportunity for me as an instructor, as a teacher, to point out the issues with negative stereotypes. Incorrect negative stereotype. Muslims are terrorists. When police face a man that looks like this, 60 years old, not going to harm anybody, holding a knife, they shoot first. Man died, right? Here, in Peel region. So negative stereotypes have deadly consequences, right? So again, it becomes a lesson for me to use those biases and those incorrect stakeholders created by ChatGPT to teach my students about those issues. Another example, I'll go through this fairly quickly. The theory of change assignment. So in this assignment, what's important is it requires a diagram, right? So not text, requires a diagram, right? A diagram, then a table, and then again, text paragraphs. And again, I won't go through the details of the assignment. So I can create diagrams like this, first using text, and then using text in a diagram generation application, right? And what's important, like captures, like a hierarchical kind of diagram pretty well, saying, hey, we need, for that program again, in terms of reducing auto theft, focusing on international students, awareness, education, community education programs, partnerships with law enforcement agencies and so on. Now we have diagram GPT, so I don't need to generate like a text kind of output first and then use a diagram software application. I can use diagram GPT and it creates like a hierarchical diagram, something like this. But again, it has a bunch of stereotypes. And one of the stereotypes is that, again, when I use text first and then a diagram application, it starts with this awareness, education. What the diagram GPT does is it starts with law enforcement, right? Which is actually the wrong approach. You actually need to start with awareness and education. So, in terms of conclusion, ChatGPT pretty useful for generating lists of stakeholders. You can use it to improve an existing list of stakeholders that the student provides, complete tables of stakeholders, structured paragraphs related to those tables, but, here's my big but, creates biasness of stakeholders, reflecting stereotypes like law enforcement and martial arts for food programs run by state religious organizations. So if you're unfamiliar with how stereotypes operate and how they're perpetuated by LLMs, if you're a student who's new to this process, then it's hard for you to understand that hey, that stakeholder doesn't belong on that list, right? And so, again, understanding these stereotypes requires that deep sociological knowledge. It's also useful for generating things like diagrams, right? Generating text paragraphs based on that hierarchy of diagrams, right? The hierarchy part is important in this assignment. The biases and hierarchies in the diagrams are much more difficult to detect. Like I gave you the example, hey, your first action shouldn't be law enforcement, it should be education awareness. But ChatGPT does that. It jumps to law enforcement first, right, in that hierarchical diagram. That's pretty well my presentation. That's my contact. Happy to answer any questions at our tables.